At your last commission meeting, there was At your last commission meeting, there was a motion for us to give the fisheries section to give an update on our AIS management activities in South Dakota. It's been quite a while, and there's been a lot of new faces on the commission since we've talked about our management plan and activities that we do. So we put just a short presentation here. I'm going to go over three of the components of AIS management, and then I'm going to hand it over to Emily, who's going to take over the education outreach section. So first off, John had sent this to all the commissioners, and this is available online for everybody who wants to find it, a copy of our AIS management plan. What this is, in the mid-90s, the federal government created some initiatives, went through a lot of different acronym changes, but now it's the National Invasive Species Act. And as a part of that act, they created this pool of money, which was slated to be $2 million, that is distributed equally to any state that has an aquatic invasive species management plan. In 2007, our department started work on that, and we did create a plan. It was signed by former Governor Rounds in 2008. And what this does is essentially qualifies us to get a piece of that money, that federal money. A lot of agencies worked on this. It's a huge list. I just save some space. I just tried to put some acronyms on there, so that makes it even more confusing. But we had multiple tribes. They were a part of it. Federal agencies helped with it. A lot of different state agencies, the Governor's Office, Department of Ag, Paul and the Isaac Walton League were also a big part of it. Department of Tourism, Education, GFP, South Dakota State University contributed multiple parts of that plan. I'll talk about another part that South Dakota State was really important with. The DENR was part of it, and then the Animal Industry Board also. So it was a big effort with a lot of different state agencies, federal agencies, and tribal agencies. So a lot of people worked pretty hard on it. What this plan is, essentially there's specific parts that are required to meet the guidelines for that federal money. And some of those I've highlighted here. First being a risk assessment, which I'll talk about in depth in a minute. And that was done through South Dakota State University. Dr. Katie Bertrand was contracted to do that and did an exceptional job with that, and I'll explain that more in depth in a minute. An inventory of what is currently in South Dakota, and then what the potential threats are coming up. And then it's separated in different goals and objectives that would help us manage invasive species effectively, provide effective education and outreach, as well as regulations and other aspects of the plan are outlined throughout. I'm going to start going through these. I've tried to, if you've seen the plan, a lot of it's really a lot of language that we don't really use when we're talking about this. First being the management plan basics, and this is the stuff that was done essentially when the plan was signed by the governor. This was drafting the plan, developing the plan, having to monitor that plan with some regularity. That was done right away, so those are all complete objectives in the plan. Then we go to the next portion of the plan, which is the risk assessment. And with that risk assessment, how that was done, Dr. Katie Bertrand got a group of 20 experts in AIS together, and they went through a long ranking process that looked at every single aquatic invasive species identified in the U.S., identified those that would be applicable to South Dakota, and then analyzed all the different possible vectors for them getting to South Dakota to find out which were the AIS species that should be of greatest concern for South Dakota. And they came up with a pretty big list, but only 13 were identified as highest concern. So that was a really good piece of information from Dr. Bertrand, and those 13 are all on the aquatic invasive species list that the Commission reviews pretty regularly. The next portions of the plan, regional and national participation. I go to meetings all over the place to stay up to date on AIS, cooperative efforts with a lot of different agencies. 100th Meridian Initiative is a group of 100th Meridian Initiative has subgroups, and we're part of the Missouri River Basin team. So all of our border states, from Missouri to Montana, we get together once a year. There's a small pool of money that is given to this group from the federal government, and that goes to education outreach tools. So one year we did bait buckets. This year we'll be getting towels. So just things that are outreach items that are the same throughout the whole region. Western Regional Panel, that's the group that has got together and done a lot of the work on the model legislation that a lot of people have seen. It's a booklet that was essentially put out that summarizes watercraft inspection programs in the Western U.S. and how to implement those in a state. So it's really just a plug-and-play guide that they created. And I've been a part of that effort since the beginning of 2010 or 2011. Missouri River Basin Panel is pretty similar. The Western Panel typically deals with quagga zebra mussels. The Mississippi Basin Panel is more the Asian carp. So there's a lot of planning that goes on with that, a lot of reviews on federal plans and guidance for state plans. The next portion of our AIS management plan is to update regulations, and we, over the past few years, have done that quite regularly. That's one that typically comes up annually in our fisheries meetings. Inspections and enforcement, that's something that the plan outlines, but we do not do any mandatory inspections in South Dakota, but it serves as a guide if that were something to occur in the future. It's already built into the plan that we have that in there. AIS monitoring, this is where we do a lot of our AIS work in South Dakota. It calls for the creation of an AIS surveillance program, which we have done, and we continue to update that on a very regular basis to ensure we're getting adequate coverage and sampling and monitoring. Rapid response protocols. This would enable us to respond very quickly if we found a new AIS population. We already have plans in place, so we know if, let's say, it's a zebra mussel that we find somewhere, we have a plan in place that this is exactly what we do. Once we know we have that first sighting, we go in and we're ready to go, ready to hit the ground running. Control and eradication. We don't really do control and eradication in South Dakota. A lot of our species, such as Asian carp, are at a point where it's not really feasible in terms of the geographic range that they inhabit and the cost of any eradication efforts. But that is a part of the plan, and it calls for plans to be able to do that. We've done a lot of work with outreach and education, and Emily's going to talk about that at the end of my presentation, so I'm not going to get into that really in depth in my part of this presentation. The plan calls the department and the partners to identify users, target public vectors, so boaters specifically that we would target, educate our staff. We do perform trainings for our regional staff on boat inspections, AIS identification. And then it calls for us to support research, which we have done through South Dakota State with a project on Asian carp, and are trying to do more in the future with additional funding from the government, federal government. And then an AIS database that I maintain, so all of our AIS sampling, whether it's talking to boaters with boater surveys or it's the actual in-the-field sampling for species, we maintain a database, and I get inquiries all the time from within state and outside the state for what do we have in South Dakota and where's it at. So we do maintain a pretty active database. So now I'm going to go into more what we've done. So that's actually the plan. This is what we have done so far in terms of enacting that plan. When we look at AIS management, it's really a three-pronged tool: control, prevention, and regulation. I'll go into each one of those a little bit more in depth here on what we've done. So in terms of regulation, that's mostly been through the commission here. We currently have administrative rules that deal specifically with aquatic invasive species. And that would be the first one being the aquatic invasive species list, so the species that we determine are AIS in South Dakota. Next are the AIS restrictions, so what people are permitted or not permitted to do with those AIS species. Watercraft restrictions, watercraft inspections, and then in a different part of administrative rule, we have a bait closure zone in eastern South Dakota that you can see here. And that was done in response to Asian carp populations. We don't allow bait capture in flowing waters in those counties. They're annually reviewed within the fisheries division and by department staff. So over the past few years, we've seen regulations almost every year. So these are things that we can do pretty easily to help with AIS management. Control, this is probably, like I had mentioned earlier, this is where we spend most of our time with AIS management. We've classified every single water body in the state managed as a fishery as a low, high, or medium priority water body. And at each each of those designations, we do a different level of sampling, and that's just to make our sampling more efficient, more cost-effective. That's mainly based on angler use and proximity to existing populations. So lakes that are close to, say, Minnesota, where there's some zebra mussel populations, will be ranked higher than another lake in Region 4 that's further away from Minnesota. At each of those different lakes, based on the water body classification or the water body priority, we do a suite of different samplings. So we do plant surveys, shoreline surveys, a D-frame net survey for invertebrates. And then at some of the very highest priority water bodies and those that are at highest risk, we also would do veliger tows for zebra and quagga mussels. It is a little bit challenging in that we have a pretty big state. We have approximately 397 water bodies on that list, I think. That's done with our staff. I'm the AIS coordinator. I hire 8 interns in the summer, 2 in each of our regions, and then we get a lot of help from our regional staff. They're extremely good at helping out. They do their standard fisheries surveys in each of their regions, and a lot of times we piggyback on top of that to make things more efficient. I had mentioned this when I had spoke to the commission in October when we first had the discussion about the quagga mussel and Angostura. This really guides what we do in terms of management. As part of that Western Regional Panel effort, we have a standardization of terms in the Western U.S. What this means is that a water body that's negative in South Dakota is the same as a water body that's negative in California or Washington. It's a way to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of state natural resources departments. So an unknown water body is one that we don't monitor at all. So this would be a stock dam or something that doesn't have a boat ramp or that's not high fishing use. Something that doesn't make a lot of sense for us to expend a lot of time and resources on because it's a pretty low risk for AIS. A negative water body would be one that we do sample every single year, but that we have never found evidence of AIS. Inconclusive, that's just a temporary designation between the time when you get the first potential positive and a second confirmation. So for Angostura, that was the month between when the Bureau of Reclamation told us they had a positive, and we were able to go out and do a second sample and find out that it was negative. On Lewis and Clark, it was actually only about 18 hours because we were out the next day looking for a second sample. The suspect water body, which is where we're at now with both of these, is one that there was a positive sample, but we were unable to substantiate that in a second sampling event. If we were able to do that, if we were able to find another zebra mussel when we went out in November on Lewis and Clark, that would have made it a positive water body. And then if we would have found multiple year classes, or multiple ages of zebra mussels, that would have made it an infested water body. The difference between those two becomes evident here when we talk about delisting. That's the ultimate goal. If we do have a water body that has an AIS, we want to be able to delist it. So for a suspect water body, which is where we're at with these, we will be sampling for 3 years very intensively on both of these water bodies that we currently have. If we don't find anything within 3 years, that will be going back to an undetected or negative water. If we were to happen to find have a positive water body, we would have to do 5 years of negative sampling. And if we had an infested water body, it'd be 5 years of negative sampling, but we would have to have an eradication event before that. So that'd be something like a dam blowing out, or in the case of fish, a rotenone application or something like that. There's so many individuals there that we know that there has to be some event to essentially kill them all before we could be certain they're gone. I said we don't do a whole lot of eradication. That's because it's extremely costly. And then this is just for an example. The Minnesota Department of Environment and Natural Resources contracted with Moroni Bioinnovations, which is the company that makes Zequinox. Zequinox is a chemical made up of bacteria that is only lethal to quagga and zebra mussels. So it's a pretty amazing chemical, but it's pretty expensive. They did a test at Christmas Lake, which was approximately 3,000 surface acres, about 2.5 feet deep, so it's about 7,500 cubic feet of water. And that cost $6,800, and it was effective. It killed all the zebra mussels there. But if we would translate that out into, say, Angostura Reservoir, if we had the same chemical cost per amount of water, it's $5.4 billion for Angostura, or if it's Lake Oahe, it's $1.1 trillion. So you can see how eradication events can be quite costly and almost prohibitively so. Outreach and education. I'm going to go through a portion of outreach and education that was done the first few years that we started really looking at this. And that was our AIS boater survey. We had interns out at boat ramps at 24 high-use lakes each year across the state, and they talked to every single boater that was going in or coming out, made sure they talked to everybody. What we did is ask them a series of questions that will allow us to find out where the boater's from, where they're going next, how much time is there between trips, do they wash their boat, how often they hear about AIS and where they hear about it from, as a way for us to target our education and outreach efforts. And it really paid off. We got a lot of great information from that. This map right here is combined data from that AIS boater survey and our annual Lake Oahe and Lake Sharp creel surveys. A little tough to see colors here, but the blue dots are from the AIS boater survey, so it's home locations of boaters that we talk to. The red dots are from Lake Sharp creel survey, and the green dots are from Oahe creel survey. So you can see we've got anglers from all over the United States. There's even some up in Alaska, but that made the map even more tough to read. And these right here are known zebra mussel or quagga mussel sites in the United States. So you can see there's pretty substantial overlap in Minnesota and other areas of the Great Lakes region. So we do have a lot of boaters coming from those areas that also have zebra and quagga mussel. Where are boaters getting their information? We gave a lot of different options for boaters to answer that one. We found out that it was almost exclusively 72% of it was from 4 sources, which really actually helps us a lot be able to target our outreach and education. We know that people are getting their information from the fishing handbook, which the department is always going to produce, so if we can get some good AIS information in there, we're reaching a lot of our anglers and boaters. Word of mouth, the only issue there is we need to make sure that people have accurate information. A lot of guys go into bait shops, and if we make sure that those bait shop owners know what they're talking about in terms of AIS, we're going to get good information out as well. Internet and signs. This was before we even had much of an aquatic invasive species page on our internet page, and Emily's going to go over a new page we're going to have when she talks here in a minute. So where do we go now? We've got some pretty big job to accomplish here over the next few months. We're going to have an AIS task force meeting by the end of April, and what that is a group of everybody that was involved in that first plan and any other interested parties. So we talked with, like for example, the University of South Dakota now has some fisheries people on staff. So that'll be a meeting of that big group, and then immediately following that, by the end of May, we'll have the AIS Plan Committee, and that's a more focused group that has experience dealing with these planning efforts. The result of that will be that we're able to update this AIS management plan by the end of June and have it more up to date. There's definitely some more information that we need to put in there. A lot of things have changed in the AIS world in South Dakota, things we need to improve upon or expand upon. So that's the goal, is to have that by the end of June, and we would definitely bring that before the commission when that's finalized. Water body reclassification. Last time we did that was in 2011, so it's probably time to reclassify our water bodies as high, medium, or low priority, especially now with some water bodies that have zebra and quagga mussels. The AIS web portal, that should be going online by mid-April if we get everything going here. And then education outreach events, that's something that never really has an end date. I talk to groups all over the state, whether it's Isaac Walton League, different clubhouses at the Isaac Walton League, Walleyes Unlimited guys, schools. We do a big event with wildlife event in the Black Hills when we do the youth conservation camp. We have a full day class on AIS, and kids are out there learning how to sample for mussels and other invertebrates. So we cooperate with a lot of different groups. And that's something that definitely won't stop. We'll be increasing that with clean boat events at Angostura and Yankton throughout the summer. A lot of contact with some lake associations in the Northeast part of the state that are really interested now. We'll be traveling a lot this year doing those. A I'll let Emily go first, and then we could probably answer some questions after that. That works for everyone.
Fine. Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. So as Mike explained, the communication and outreach plan that our communications team has developed and worked on with Mike is just one piece of the overall AIS management plan in South Dakota. So the intent of this public education and awareness campaign is to further increase the awareness of AIS in South Dakota and educate identified audiences on what actions are required in attempt to slow the spread of AIS in water bodies across the state. Mike mentioned in the last 2 to 3 years some of the work that has been done to provide awareness-only communication activities through that voter survey. Some billboards were done, ice machine wraps, some stickers, print and digital ads have been done before, radio public service announcements, as well as distribution of other collateral materials like t-shirts, kids' tattoos, information handouts at events like our state fair and, like he mentioned, youth conservation camp, things like that. Now going forward into 2015, we know that it's more important than ever to continue branding this program and elevate the education awareness through more specific targeted messaging. So in the last month or so, we've identified specific, measurable, achievable, timely, and results-focused goals to educate and inform our target audiences about the prevention, management, and control of AIS in South Dakota. We'll continue to research and evaluate those internal, external, and secondary audiences as we move forward into the spring and summer months. We've also discussed and continue to work with Mike to identify any barriers to our messages and how we can overcome them and change them if needed as we move forward. And then we've got key messages for each of the audiences we've identified. And some of those specific platforms were also in the works. And one of the main ones that he also mentioned was the website. I have to move over here, though, to navigate it and show you. So this is, I don't know if I can do both. So this is a website that we worked on in the last month. It's still in a test format, but it serves as that central hub of information where digital users, other customers can go to find information on AIS in South Dakota. And some of this will change now because we haven't finalized those pending rules yet, but it is a responsive web design, so it will render on any mobile and tablet device, as you can see here. But I'll just kind of give you a brief overview. So it's sdleastwanted.com, which is what the URL will be when we launch this beginning part of April, mid-April. We've got a laws section here. Some of this might be subject to change after today, and that's okay. The species information, like he identified with the silver and bighead carp. There'll be some instructional videos, on carp cleaning, and then this video here explains the Lake Yankton below Gavin's Point Dam renovation that took place last year. There's some boat washing tips and images, as well as the boat washing locations throughout South Dakota. A section for news and other updates as it relates to AIS, and I expect that we'll be pushing out more news and information as we move forward. There'll be a map section, which we're still working on, and then additional resources and some FAQs for folks. Some of these are, where do they come from? How did they get here? How can we get rid of them? What's the state doing to help? What can I do to help? Things like that. Can I harvest silver, bighead, grass, or common carp? Can I shoot jumping Asian carp with a firearm? So explaining some of those things that are happening, and then providing additional information to some of these partner organizations down here. And then, again, we've got an area for those containment waters, how folks can help, how to report a species if they they encounter one, because we all know that anglers and recreational boaters are that first line of defense in the fight against AIS. So, and then how they can stay connected. And like I said, this is still a test site, so it's not live yet. But for that area there, kind of moving forward into some of the other communications activities we have planned is, in addition to this new website, we'll have another hashtag campaign. It'll be hashtag SD Least Wanted, similar to the SD in the Field one that we launched last fall, but this one will now encourage our digital customers to connect with us while they're out boating and fishing throughout the spring and summer months, and encourage them to show how they're helping to slow and reduce the spread of aquatic invasive species in South Dakota when they're sharing their own videos and photos, because we know they're going to do that anyways, so we'll just encourage them to share those with us. And we'll give some examples here as the weather gets nicer on how they can do that once we're able to get out and take some images and videos ourselves. We'll use some of our existing social media platforms through Game Fish and Parks, our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube platforms. Again, targeted emails will be another way to communicate with our anglers and boaters, both residents and non-residents, on what the new rules are, especially if behaviors are changing. We're gonna put Mike on a radio blitz, set him up with probably a dozen or so radio interviews across the state, so that he can speak to the new AIS rules and provide boaters and anglers information on what's expected to them as they're out fishing and boating this spring and summer, and really talk about expanding the outreach that's taking place. We'll also have some PSAs that have already been developed in-house that we'll distribute to radio stations and get those involved in the PSA rotation. And then we've got some print and digital media in the works. As far as print media goes, Dakota Country magazine will be back-to-back monthly ads there throughout the spring and summer. South Dakota Outdoors, it's a publication by the Capital Journal here in town, and then some other DNR magazines with our neighboring states, especially Nebraska, Iowa, and Minnesota, and potentially maybe some others if they have those types of publications. And then a supplement to the Sioux Falls Shopping News, there's a Fishing Outlook publication that comes out in April, so we'll be doing some print ads with them. Digital media I spoke about just now too. This is something new. I'm pretty excited about it. We'll be partnering with some marketing specialists at Kello to place our digital ads, where we'll be incorporating retargeting through the internet. And what this really is when a user visits sdleastwanted.com, they're going to learn about AIS. They're going to maybe check out if there's a boat washing station near their favorite lake or wherever they plan to fish. Then they're going to exit our site. Maybe a couple days later, they're going to come back to the internet. They're going to go to cabela's.com. They're in search of maybe some new fishing or other outdoor gear. What's going to happen then is some cookies come into play, and our SD Least Wanted /AIS ad pops up, continuing to keep our brand and that message top of mind. You see it in all of your internet searches, whether you notice it or not, but they know what you're looking for, they know what sites you've visited, and that's called retargeting, and that's what we're going to essentially do here. It just guarantees that repeated exposure through search engine marketing. So, and then we'll have some digital ads on kelloland.com as well as the Kello app, and then gfp.sc.gov as well. Some of the collateral materials and giveaways that will continue as they do today. T-shirts, towels you mentioned, and a couple new things. Tailgate wraps, correct, on GFP vehicles. I don't know the details on those. I think probably still working those out, as well as some plastic baggies, pending any regulations. And then the other exciting thing with our Conservation Digest, the March-April issue is going to be 100% dedicated to aquatic invasive species.
questions for Emily? Comments? Go ahead.
I just want to thank you for what you've done so far and what you're going to do. I think it's terrific and leads to a couple questions. You know, it really is an issue much bigger than game fish and parks, and I'm just curious to know what response, if any, you've gotten from other agencies or other parts of state government. Is everybody interested in getting together and working on the subject, do you think?
I think I can answer that. I've been in contact with a lot of the original agencies that were part of the AIS Plan Committee. A lot of them are very interested. Actually, Department of Environment and Natural Resources wants to piggyback on some sampling. So Department of Ag expressed a lot of interest. DENR, SDSU, USD, like I had said, had some people that were very interested now. Had some good responses from a few of the tribes. I'm willing to participate again. Fish and Wildlife Service has an office here in town, so that's great. They're able to really help out with that too.
That's really good. And then one of my interests, and everybody's interest, I'm sure, is stopping all this at the border, right? So it doesn't get here in the first place any more than it has. I assume that's going to be part of this discussion, whether it's boat inspections or whatever it is. So whether it's Minnesota boaters or Iowa or wherever they come from, we're going to be looking at what do we do to do the best we can practically to prevent the AIS problem from coming from across the border.
Yeah, that's definitely something we'll have to take a look at, especially when we're rewriting the plan, making sure that's part of the new updated AIS plan. The important thing with the regulations that are up for finalization today was that any department representative could do an inspection or require the AIS to be removed. So that could potentially lead to a few things, and there's some things we worked out with it yet, but maybe some roadside inspections in different parts of the state throughout the year, or some more involved law enforcement presence than we've had in the past.
Thank you.
Other questions? Go ahead.
I just think it's amazing what you guys have put together already. I know you were working at it before last month, but all the digital stuff and everything is going to get the word out really well once you get that online.
Okay. Nice job.